Welcome to Tech Startup Stories, hosted by Natalie Binns. This is the podcast that takes you behind the scenes of the B2B startup world.
Hi, I'm Natalie Binns, and I'm the host of Tech Startup Stories. This podcast is really designed to share the unique and challenging journeys of all the people that are building small startups to scale-ups in the tech space. My background, initially I was in sales and then I moved into marketing, and I've been lucky enough to work with some amazing tech companies. But my passion is really startups. And that led me back to helping tech startups set up their marketing and go-to-market functions where the budgets are tight and the resources are few and far between. So let's get into this week's podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome to this week's podcast. Today I've got James Ker-Reid joining us, and he is the founder of Autelo.ai. If you look at his LinkedIn profile, you would see that he is currently juggling a number of different things, as well as being a first-time founder. So James, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Natalie.
I'm really intrigued as to when you actually sleep, and whether you actually get any time to eat or go to the gym or do anything normal outside of your 27 jobs or whatever it is that you're doing these days.
Yeah, it's quite full on. I've got a young family as well, little baby and a toddler as well. So it's quite full on. I have sort of balancing some of my freelance and fractional kind of sales and GTM consulting, and coaching commitments. And then obviously I'm building Autelo.ai, a LinkedIn content and engagement platform for B2B businesses. So yeah, it's a balance between those three things, and then health and fitness as well. We're definitely down to this kind of military precision in terms of my agenda, at least around work for sure. So yeah, I try to be in many places at once, and I do enjoy it as well, the variety.
Well, we've established that having a toddler and a newborn or a little one means that you're probably not getting much sleep. So that totally makes sense. So tell us about Autelo. Where did it come from? Why now? Given your crazy schedule, tell us more about that.
Yeah, so I started a sales and marketing consultancy 8 years ago called Sales for Startups. And that was focused on founder-led B2B SaaS companies that were typically run by techies who'd got initial traction, maybe initial funding as well, and wanted to really create a revenue engine in their business, a scalable, repeatable sales and marketing motion. And I sort of fell upon that idea by chance, really, through a friend of mine who said, could you help my 4-person startup? And I thought, oh, this is a bit more interesting than being a B2B software salesperson. So I sort of jumped ship and started that, not knowing that, go on to service over 50 B2B SaaS companies at seed and Series A level. But one of the challenges I had, both in my own business as well as our clients' businesses, was marketing. And that took lots of challenges, both internally. I've spent over $500,000 of my own money in my last company, Sales and Startups, on marketing, including, people, software, and so forth. My clients have spent over 50 million on marketing as well, and not much to show for it, to be honest. And I thought to myself, what's going on here? Why am I and my clients ultimately not delivering on their expectations, meeting their goals? And it comes down to a couple of key things. One is that in startups, when it comes to B2B marketing, the expectations are really high. And that's obviously driven by a lot of other people, sort of comparing, contrasting yourself against other people and thinking, we need to be doing this, like this is the way we need to be doing these 27 things well. And it's just, we need to do that. And there's kind of a FOMO effect of B2B marketing. So the expectations are really, really high, number one. Secondly, the resources are really low. So both financial as well as people are quite small within startups. Time is quite low in terms of, do they actually have the time to contribute to actually build a B2B sort of marketing engine? Not normally. And then also the kind of feedback that comes with developing something from often scratch or from early stages is often not there. They don't understand that, things aren't built in a day. And also you have to kind of review and feedback on things. Even when we were building it for clients, they had to kind of feedback a lot to get approval. Is this right? Is this not? Is this positioning right? What do you think of this message? What do you think of this campaign, etc.? And it creates a lot of inertia, and it's really hard to get momentum consistently. And so, the tipping point for me was a year ago from when this is recorded in June 2024. I lost a massive renewal for one of our existing clients, and it was worth about 250,000, put it into perspective, this renewal. And they rated, our marketing efforts, because it was a sales and marketing kind of joint service proposition, the marketing element a 6 out of 10, and they gave us in sales like a 10 out of 10. And they said, like, our focus is marketing. We really need to improve our marketing, and hence we're not going to renew. And I remember coming off that Zoom in Farringdon, where my office was, and thinking, God, what am I going to do next? This is really disappointing. I just wrote down my iNotes, which was the tipping point of this. I wrote down this question: imagine if you could create a B2B marketing engine with a fraction of the cost and fraction of personnel for £1,000 a month that would deliver £1 million of revenue. And that was a really, I don't know really where that question came from, but probably from a element of frustration and annoyance and obviously disappointment on the renewal. So yeah, then I decided, well, let's maybe look into how we solve this. And I mentioned that question to a lot of my peers and acquaintances as well. And they were like, James, you should go and work that out. And I was like, as in the answer to that question. And I was like, maybe I should. So that's where the journey really started.
And I guess in that sense, you had the problem. That was what kind of drove you to really think about that. And and coming from that kind of sales and marketing background, but particularly, looking at your profile, you're definitely strong on the sales side, and have been doing that for years. What kind of influences and advice did you get from people in the marketing world that are kind of boots on the ground today?
Yeah, really good question. So when I initially had the idea, I thought this would be a really good product for founders who don't really like marketing. They could kind of plug and play. This would be really easy. Founder-led marketing, basically, was my initial idea. Then I spoke to one of my previous clients who run a MarTech company and exited, a guy called Tony Hoppinen. And he was like, well, James, I just don't think founders really understand the effort and the complexity of building a B2B marketing function. And I was like, what do you mean, Tony? He's like, have you spoken to many marketers? And I was like, well, I was spoken to a couple, but he was like, no, I want you to, next 2-3 weeks, I want you to go and speak to sort of 10, 15 marketers. So I came back not in sort of 2-3 weeks, but about 2 months later and said, oh, I've now spoken to 111 B2B marketers. And I think, yeah, this is a pretty significant problem. And the B2B marketers really understand the problem, and they understand the heavy lift that's needed in order to execute on these initiatives and these plans. And this is not a product for the founder, and this is a product for the B2B marketer. And yeah, so it was definitely, even when I looked at my LinkedIn network, I had 2 sort of B2B marketers in my network in SaaS. And I was like, well, that's not going to be very good for market research, is it? So I went out and, did some campaigns, to build some feedback interviews. I had sort of 2 stages, one which was validating the problem and really understanding the environment within a B2B marketer's world in SaaS. And then the second one was sort of early validation, when I had taken that input and built some Figmas and a technical architecture and scheme, just in some provisional plans, not actually built it, but in terms of I had sketched it out. And then I could sort of marry, their feedback with the Figma screens and obviously get their feedback on the sort of product vision rather than just the idea, or even just interviewing them to understand the problem. So it was a kind of 2-stage process that I went through to understand the B2B marketers. And that's even slightly changed recently, but we can go on to that if you want as well.
Yeah, tell me how you've been pivoting, because I think this is what most founders go through. They start with a particular problem that they want to solve, and then they go on this journey. And it's never a straight line, and all those outside influences that you kind of engage with help guide and direct that journey. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, so, to fast forward a little bit closer to today, um, what I've realized is we've got kind of a full sort of extensive Figma and a development plan and scope, etc. And one thing I realized is that we were going to do things a little bit differently. So what we've decided to do, instead of building a product the typical SaaS way, which would be, build, an idea, maybe have a waiting list, build a massive waiting list, then, potentially develop the first version of the product, then release it to market, see if you get feedback, and then go through multiple pivots. I was like, is there a way of shortcutting that? Is there a way of getting the user feedback quicker than just, sign up to my waiting list and then I'll build a product in hope in a vacuum and hopefully like you'll like it. And because I'm a commercial founder and not like a technical AI expert, I was like, are there skills that I can use in order to basically shorten that feedback cycle to develop a better product? So what I decided to do was create basically an incubator of 20 companies. And it's like a product hackathon attached to that incubator. So what we're doing is we're developing the product with the users week by week. So it's very much a user-led development experience for these paid beta customers. And the commitment is pretty small in order to be part of that beta, but it's just more a commitment of this is interesting. I would like to know more. I'd like to go on the journey. I'd like to be with other people who are going on this journey. And this is going to be quite interesting, for me. So to come back to your question of the pivot, I did loads of research with B2B marketers and they're still interested in Autelo, but when we released the paid beta a couple of weeks ago, so we had a sort of £500 sign up to 6 months of beta access to the platform. And I thought, I'll go back to all the interviewees and, maybe I'll get sort of 10% conversion on the 100 plus, people that reach out to thought, that would be the first 10. That would be really good. As a cohort of 10 at least, that was kind of a go, no go threshold for me. And so I put it out there and basically I got some positive responses, but no one actually investing £500. And I was like, what's up here? What am I missing? And what I realized was that in B2B SaaS companies, having been involved in startups for a decade now, is that they just try so many tools and it is a bit of churn and burn. And obviously we're used to trying things for 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days, and we kind of push and pull different tools in and out. And there's so much, we're in this like innovative sort of micro environment where we're just used to things turning over really, really quickly. But the people that actually bought the product and invested the £500 for the 6 months beta access, they were agencies, consultants, professional services companies, where they realize that they need to do more when it comes to LinkedIn content and engaging their audience. But they felt like the enigma of all these tools was very complex for them. They're not sure who to trust. They kind of know that they need to do more. And they've been the first 10 people that have, committed to Autelo, which is very interesting. There is also like a resell and on-sell angle potentially with those consultants and agencies as well. That's something for 2026. But yeah, it's been really interesting, all this like validation and so forth. And then when you actually ask people for money, sometimes a different audience comes up and actually puts their credit card in the Stripe page and, commits to be part of the beta.
And I think that says a lot about this shift and trying to find product market fit. You're gathering information around the problem from the people that experience it most day to day. But sometimes we end up finding our product market fit where we least expect it, or in an area that we don't necessarily expect it. I want to quickly talk about go to market because you've kind of talked about it being very user led. This development process that you're going through, which by the way I think is really different and quite brave to go through, because you're relying on a small pool of people to shape your product. But the fact that they're paying customers, I think, is fantastic. Given your background in B2B sales, but this product-led, user-led growth mentality, how do you see your future go-to-market strategy kind of panning out over the next year or two?
Yeah, so I think we are definitely onto something with these agencies and service-led companies. Obviously, that was a company that I built myself previously. The market is pretty big. If you look at even the UK economy, ranges depending on which index you look at between sort of 55 to 70% of the UK economy are kind of services businesses. So, and globally, that's huge as well. Europe, that's like 5x what we have, sometimes even higher number and percentage in some European countries. So I think that trend of sort of even micro agencies or small agencies, small consultancies is not going to go away. And with the efficiencies of AI, machine learning, new technology, people are going to be able to do more with less. So that's actually quite a good trend for Otello, because you've got small companies wanting to punch above their weight and not wanting to spend huge amounts on, maybe even a fractional CMO, a fractional, marketing manager. And so they're thinking, okay, is there a way that internally we could do this, with maybe some software and obviously some portion of someone's time within the team? Um, for example, even in the beta list, we've got ranging from sort of architectural practices to recruitment agencies to kind of marketing agencies to publishing agencies, lots of different types of professional services companies. But I do think that, yeah, I weirdly enough, my original Tony asked me to do this as well, like draw the kind of circles of the TAM on the slide to just show me, to explain basically my thinking to Tony. And I did it. And my first circle was the B2B SaaS marketer in those sort of 10 to 50 person businesses. And I basically skipped to circle two, which is the UK services business, instead of the circle one being that. So I always thought that there was a big market, because I think that, yeah, you've got interest levels in B2B SaaS really high in new technology and AI and machine learning. But there's also this like propensity of either one, like a build it yourself, which obviously that's partly true in terms of what they can and can't do. Um, and secondly, they're just used to seeing all these new startups, arrive because they're on LinkedIn and they see these new things. They're like, oh, I can do that. Whereas if you're a sort of a, architectural practice in Birmingham, your network is going to be different than if you're in a B2B SaaS startup London kind of circle. It's just human nature that your influence is going to be slightly different. So yeah, I think there's a little bit more caution, obviously, with the services companies, but also they definitely need to innovate and to change and to adapt and know that we need to be doing more, given this competitive, and sort of tech-led innovation curve we're going through.
Absolutely. And you've mentioned Tony, I'm guessing in a mentoring capacity. You're doing so many different things on your own. Talk me through your support network, people that are helping you build the product, supporting you from a mentoring perspective.
Yeah, so I have a couple of good mentors that help me. So Tony is a previous client of Sales to Startups. We know each other, I think, since 2019, 2020. So, quite a few of the founders that I've worked with, become friends with, and, exchange WhatsApps and texts, etc., with them many years after engaging. So yeah, Tony's been support. I also have support from someone that I worked with at one of my clients who's a product lead and product manager, in terms of like really understanding the development side of it and how we're going to execute and practice as well. So Andrea is helping me there. Then in terms of obviously development, I have a sort of solution architect, sort of tech architect type of advisor as well. That's been referred to me, by a friend as well, Rob. And then obviously I have my development company as well that is also, helping obviously with the filter of those kind of three people that I'm bouncing ideas off as well. Um, between those three as well as development company and obviously my own intuition and thoughts and experience. So I'm navigating my way through, I believe anyway.
Absolutely. And obviously, starting now, I don't think we really answer the question of why now. And also with with the sheer amount of stress that puts on you and your family to be doing that now.
Yeah, so I think there's part of it, if I'm brutally honest, which is a bit of a new year, new thing type of thinking. I came up to my 8 years. I remember in 2017 when I first started my consultancy, I worried about my own staying power because I'd been in roles max 2, 3 years tops, in my career prior to that. And I remember being at Glastonbury once and thinking, wow, and I've done 2 years. If I come to Glastonbury next year, I would have been in somewhere the longest place I ever have been. And then I was listening to Ed Sheeran and waving the waving the shirt around the head, that very famous Ed Sheeran Glastonbury Pyramid stage, and thinking, wow, I've done it. 3 years, I've done my longest stint in one company. Now 8 years, I was thinking I definitely know that I've got staying power. So I think there's part of it was kind of a review. The other thing was that with the consultancy, the last 2 years, obviously you had like the post-COVID funding boom, and then you had a sort of rebalancing from 23 to 25. When you look at East Coast VCs, there's a horrible graph which just shows sort of a pyramid shape, basically, for those listening. And that peak was kind of end of 22. And then 23 to 25 has been a downslope of the pyramid. And so that definitely affected, my consultancy, where we were seeing drops of 70% in terms of volume. And we were very much on the seed Series A type of B2B SaaS companies. So we were definitely relying on like VC funds coming. And what happened was obviously a lot of the VCs kind of migrated up the chain to double down on existing investments to rebalance the portfolio, which definitely affected the market of the SaaS startups. So there was part of it that wasn't like an instant decision and, it's 2025, let's go and build something new. It was like, I could see we were flatlining over the previous 2 years of SaaS startups. And I thought, right, this is probably a good time to go and to do something different. And also the other thing is I explain it to mates as like, any gamers out there, it's a bit like playing a computer game and completing it 50 times. When it came round to would you like to do another 10, 20 more, I was like, I kind of really do know about GTM and B2B SaaS companies. Like, I've analyzed, typically 60 data points per company. I'd spoken to over 1,000 B2B SaaS founders in 8 years. I'd mentored 250 of them. I'd worked, and implemented systems in 51 of them. I had really gone deep, exponential level in terms of understanding the market. And for me, intellectually, it didn't really have the same draw as, James, never run a software company before. Let's try and work that one out. And, especially in the world of AI machine learning, I was like, that's very interesting. Still relatable in terms of my skills of sales and marketing and the experience and challenges and ups and downs of that. But, I hadn't run a software company and I was like, saying to friends, it's like going back to kindergarten. I'm like, the new starter at the school. I'm like, wow, there's a lot of big kids here. I'm starting a new school and I'm not even sure where my classrooms are. But that's also quite fun for me as a sort of entrepreneurial type of guy. Is like, I enjoy that sort of starting from scratch, starting with a blank sheet of paper. That's quite fun for me.
Great. So In terms of building the product, you've got your beta out, you've kind of set that up for the next sort of 6 months. And then what? After that 6 months, what's your plan?
Yeah, so bootstrapping for V1 for the paid beta. V2 is we've got obviously some strong ideas as to what that looks like already. And then it's the question of do we go for funding, or do we try and bootstrap it and go through an incremental flow? And that's going to be really kind of linchpin is going to be Q1 2026 and how that's going to fare, to be honest. Because the indicative plan is to go out for funding in Q2 2026, looking at maybe a 1.5 to 2 million raise in that quarter. I had some interest in Autelo in terms of the concept and sort of idea stage and looking at, a SEIS round to get the product off the grounds, from a few angels and also EIS fund as well. But I was like, there's part of me which just thought, one, obviously the kind of dilution points, but also I thought to myself, imagine walking into the VC's office with a tangible product that they can feel, they can experience, they can see the case studies of the customers and see like how this works in practice. Because it is quite difficult to explain a product that doesn't exist. And yes, you focus on the problem and then do those normal things you'd explain in sales and marketing, kind of, practice, good practice. But I also thought, well, I'd love to walk in with a tangible product. There's something great about selling someone on a vision with something they can touch and feel and experience. And they know that that's not the final version. As in, for us, the vision of Autelo is to become like your AI comms assistant. That will include multiple mediums, multiple platforms that will synergize and learn off each other as well. So that not only you know what's going on, but also you can learn from those channels. I've got this big sort of hypothesis in that, greater context from AI creates better output. And that context can come obviously from like the business data and the integration, but also you can amplify that with actually learning from inbound and outbound and from LinkedIn to, Facebook, etc. So you can, you can kind of cross-pollinate your understanding across different mediums and different channels and do that in an incremental way where you're using technology to continually learn and update and improve as well. So you sort of put your learning on steroids, basically. So that's my take on it. Is that do we bootstrap it? Do we go for funding? Yeah, watch this space. He'll probably come back in a year and ask me then. And I'll probably give you an easier and more direct answer as to where we're at.
Great. And in terms of your journey so far, and I know you're only sort of, 7 months into the journey, what has been the most difficult, frustrating part of that journey so far?
I think the development side has been difficult in terms of really understanding. I understand sales and marketing really well. So, for example, even when someone is advertising or pitching to me, I know that there's some sort of commercial incentive at play. Where development's very interesting, especially when you're outsourcing development, is you realize that a lot of things can be done. And there's an element of risk for that agency or that development partner. There's obviously the element of cost, which is also related to risk as well. And thirdly, what I've learned is sometimes they just are not sure or they don't know. And they're not really willing to actually say that. And for me, that's been a challenge of like, because we're developing a product with the users, there are going to be things that we're not going to know when we start. And that's okay for me. Like this is an iterative, hyper agile kind of development experience. So that's okay that we don't know all there is to know about developing the product because we are pushing frontiers and pushing boundaries, especially with the kind of ideal customer profile is generated through AI. And that data is coming through all of your business applications. So your Google Drive, your Gmail, your CRM. So we're indexing and passing huge amounts of data to build obviously customer profile as well, which is something that we haven't really seen in AI to date. We've seen like, connect to your Google Drive on Claude or GPT to search things and give a bit more context. But we're not getting that into, a real consumable format that then could be leveraged for a marketing output. So there's always these like gaps in terms of that's some of my understanding from the research is that some of these things can be done in isolation. But you've then kind of got to repeat that behavior or do lots of manual work to kind of connect the dots. Whereas with Autelo, that's made a lot easier because that's built in. So yeah, I think that's been some of the hardest things. And everyone, you know, looks at things differently as well. So you get different recommendations that are quite, very unique and different to the other party that you go to. And you're trying to weigh up, is that risk? Is that cost? Is that technical expertise? You know, what's the play here? Are they just worried about they're saying, I'm not actually sure how we can do this. Whereas for me as an entrepreneur and as someone that's commercial, I'm like, that's okay. Lots of times when I was helping 2 4-person startups in the early stages in 2017, 2018, that they had no idea how this is going to play out. And I was like, that's absolutely fine. The market, the conversations, they'll tell us which way to go. Whereas obviously for a developer, that's really higher risk and that's really at the edge of their comfort zone. So that's, definitely been a learning experience for me so far.
And what have been the best bits of the journey so far? Things that perhaps have surprised you in a good way?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that have surprised me, and I've really sort of some highlights of this early journey so far are when I realized obviously that we were going to cut away a lot of the fat from the MVP and really double down on LinkedIn as the primary platform. I also realized that was a major business risk to go all in on LinkedIn, where multiple technologies use sort of web scraping or what we call kind of CSS or shadow browsing. So they almost imitate the browser and then, scrape the data, in that page. And obviously for our compliance and for terms of use, we've seen Apollo, we've seen these other things kind of be blacklisted from that. I was like, this looks really risky. So for me to go and spend a fair amount of money on development without LinkedIn's approval. So I went out and researched what the LinkedIn API program was about, how you could get a LinkedIn API. And we were successful in getting a LinkedIn API, the development tier access to the community API, which definitely unlocked, that validation for us and also reduced business risk massively because we're playing by LinkedIn's rule book, basically. So that was a major highlight. The other one was more sort of tangible and visceral, which was when we did the update to our Figma screens. And we really went deep in terms of what the user experience would be. I really started to see what the vision could be and also really helped build some assets that I desperately needed to build for the launch, which was, a landing page for the beta, some sort of feature pages that obviously came off that landing page as well. So, when that Figma project was done, which was advised from Andrea as well, to give the developers more guardrails and give them, a better depth of Figma screen to show like how things are going to work. I also then turned that into sort of sales and marketing exercise where I could use this imagery across the website and obviously then, go forward with the launch. So that was really quite fun. I was like, wow, I could only see the product vision, but I was like, oh, I didn't really have much imagery for the site. So I was like, now I've actually got imagery that I can use. And build those, landing pages with ease as well. So that was a cool experience. And then, the final one is just, but I got a recent Autelo branded polo as well, which was kind of quite nice. It sounds like really sort of ego driven, but it was when you're always pitching a vision or all an ideas, and obviously we're pre-product in terms of sort of final product at the moment. It was nice to have something tangible with the company's name on it. And it was also a bit of my regret with sales to startups is we didn't really have any sort of swag as well as we're building the company. And I just thought to myself, wow, like I'm going to do this, James. Like I'm going to build this, like I'm going to bootstrap this. I'm going to get this out there. People want this. People are paying for it. And now like I'm the founder and I sort of, wore my shirt actually for the first time yesterday. and I received it yesterday morning and I wore it to an event last night. I felt incredibly proud of like where I was going. It felt like I gained that element of sort of self-conviction and self-acceptance, which was nice. It's weird to say that just a polo shirt does that, but it was it was definitely like, come on, James, let's go for it. So
I think most people will relate to that. And, especially if you've been in the industry any length of time, you'll have worn brand after brand, kit, swag, pens. I've probably got a pot of them from different companies. And, to be able to wear your own brand, I think, yeah, absolutely embrace that and be proud. And you shouldn't feel ashamed or embarrassed of that in any way. And I'm sure all of the founders that are on this podcast are in exactly the same boat. James, it has been an absolute pleasure to speak with you today. I hope we're going to get to speak in, another year or next year at some point, and to find out how things have gone and hopefully hear about your decision to either continue bootstrapped or take the leap into the funding rounds. But thank you so much for being part of the show today.
thank you so much, Nettie.
That's it for this episode of Tech Startup Stories. Have a story you'd like us to share or a topic you'd want to cover? Reach out and we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, take care.